So, welcome to Readers of the Pack. I'm Linda Mall, and I'm owner, founder of Accountability by Design, igniting conversations that matter. And my passion project is Readers of the Pack, and this particular initiative, Authors Speak. As a constant reader and lover of growth and growing leaders, this just warms my heart. It is designed to create a community for leaders who are readers. A warm welcome to each of you who are on the call, and thank you for joining us online at Author Speak. We hope you have some great questions alongside for our authors today. And a great welcome to my co-host, Laura Haynes. And I'll let Laura introduce herself right now.
Wonderful. Thank you, Linda. Really appreciate that. Welcome, everybody. Really appreciate you joining us today. I'm Laura Haynes. I am the co-host of Authors Speak and a business coach. I spent probably 20 plus years in the business industry. Most of my career was in sales and technology. And I am proud to be co-creating this passion project with Linda Mall, who has been a friend of mine and a colleague and a coach at one time in my career for over 20 years, I think, Linda. So I think that's really important to point out. So we invite you to save your questions. We will have time at the end to absolutely have Maggie and Betsy field questions and answer very specific things about things that you are curious about or things that are happening in your business life that you need some support and guidance with. And that will happen in the last 15 minutes of the call. But also feel free to put them in the chat. We want this to be really interactive for everyone. That's really important to us. And as Linda was saying, share where you're from. We're really interested in where you're calling in from, uh, why you joined. Is there something specific that intrigued you about this particular session that had you join us today? Because we always want to know and build on that. We will be sharing a PowerPoint with you afterwards, and this will give you all the information that you need on Betsy and Maggie. I'm sure they both have seen me looking at their profiles and checking out all the people who actually promoted the book initially, who have been also gracious to connect with me on LinkedIn, like Margaret Heffernan as an example, and Dan Heath. Just wonderful people, very successful people, obviously, who support you in the journey that you've been on. We will also be sending out the link to the recording, so you can, go back to the part that you had the epiphany, which I always do. So Linda and I, when we chose this book, it really struck both of us that Betsy and Maggie have learned something powerful, that when women work together, um, they discover a level of support, flexibility, confidence, accountability, and freedom to be themselves. And that is not always the case, as we all know, in the workplace and sometimes in our personal lives, and that you rarely find in other relationships. And so now please welcome Betsy Joseph and Maggie Chotas. Maggie, I hope I pronounced your name correctly. Co-authors of Power Through Partnership, How Women Lead Better Together. And this was a winner of the 2015 Silver Medal IPPY Award in Business Career Sales. So congratulations to you on that. I know it's been some time since it has been awarded to you, but as Linda and I have conversed over this, there's so many great authors out there that have written amazing books, and this is just one of them. And we're so glad that we found you. So welcome to both of you. Thank you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Thank
Yeah.
you.
Delighted to be here.
Fabulous. I want to say a little bit more because one of the theories in the book is the rubber band theory, and you are living it. And so after writing, I'm going to read my notes. After writing about the partnership stretch, Betsy and Maggie decided to stretch their own collaboration by taking on new roles. Maggie serves as the director of group facilitation for the Dispute Settlement Center in Orange County, and Betsy is the director of Jewish life at Elon University. Their partnership is still a priority. Betsy and Maggie continue to work and partner together as co-facilitators, writers, speakers, and at the heart of it, all longtime friends. Both Maggie and Betsy are actively engaged in their respective communities. And Betsy is in Chapel Hill with her husband, a pampered Shih Tzu named Gizmo, and Annie and Michael, her young adult children. Maggie lives in Durham with her husband, Harold, and children, Georgia and Nick. Her pets, Argos, the golden doodle, which I had, and Selena, the cat, keep her on her toes. So I found that very interesting because in my career as an entrepreneur now for almost, this is just scary, 30 years, as a consultant, leadership trainer, now executive coach for the last 20, I have always partnered with other women. And that comment about sisterhood really sat in my heart because I've probably had five collaborative working relationships over the years that have been long term. They're all great friends still. And so I do believe in the power that comes with this. It is why I've had the joy in my career that I've had. So, what drove you to write this book initially?
Well, yes, and I'm excited to talk more about the partnership stretch because it's such an important part of the story. It comes a little later, but Maggie and I were started a consulting practice called the Mulberry Partners, and we put a lot of intentional thinking into starting our collaboration. A lot of thinking about what it meant for us as two longtime friends. Already, we had quite a history, quite a friendship at that point, many years of connection and knowing each other and growing up together. And we thought, if we're going to put this business, we're going to work together as partners. What will that mean for our friendship? And how do we preserve the friendship at the core of our partnership? We had seen some examples where partnerships didn't work out because of the friendship at the core. So we really wanted to be mindful and careful. So we looked around for women who were working together. We looked around for role models. And at that time, we didn't see many, so we started really trying to find them wherever we could. And at that point, I think we started by looking for role models. We weren't looking to write a book in the very beginning. We were looking for guidance for how to preserve this partnership, how to preserve this friendship. So whenever we would read an article, and it was interesting. There weren't many articles that said, Catherine and Linda are partners, or, it was more Linda and her. There were hints of collaboration, but it wasn't overt. So we would start to recognize those clues and pull them out. And after finding some of these women to talk with, we realized that these were stories that were not being shared. And these were powerful examples. They were powerful for us, but we imagined they would be powerful for others. So we felt like we wanted to, and many of the women we talked with said, nobody knows this. These are examples. People look at us as leaders, but they don't look at us as partner leaders. So this is important for other women to know about. So we started really thinking about what would it take and what would it mean to write a book and to collect these stories and to share what we had learned about the power of working together. So that was the kind of the genesis of our writing project.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we looked to write the book we couldn't find. Once we found those partners and started talking with them, their stories resonated so much with us, and we were learning so much, as Betsy was describing. We were craving that wisdom, that we felt like there wasn't a pathway for us to really be able to learn from. And so really Betsy had the vision of collecting these stories for us and for other people. So women could start further down that path than we were able to, because we didn't know what the resources were until we really were able to find them. And that was a bit of detective work to find folks.
Cool. Yeah. And I'll turn it back to Laura for the next
Sure,
question.
sure.
Yeah.
Betsy, you you talked about the catalyst for writing this book, and then you said, I really want to talk about the partnerships because that really was the root sort of driver of what was going on in your life, and certainly I think for many at that time in finding collaborators in the workplace and mentors, whatever it is that you would have called it. But for those listening to the call who are possibly considering a partnership, this is really a three-part question. So you pose the question early in the book, what if women saw the possibility of partnership as a logical, radical way of working? If you want to refer to how this was the root catalyst for you when you wrote the book, and can you talk about how the landscape, or does the landscape look any different today, um, from your perspective?
Maggie, I know you did some digging, right? This is a question we've been talking a lot about, so.
Oh, good.
Yeah, and in thinking, kind of just to put out some milestones there, we started working around the Mulberry Partners in 2002, and we incorporated or became a more formal entity in 2003. And I can always remember that because I was pregnant with my youngest son when we really kind of got the entity going, and he's now graduating from Virginia Tech this semester. So it's like the whole life of our
Nick
business
Chotas.
is marked in the growth of the youngest among our children. Um, and so then when the book came out in 2014, we were starting to see more women partners really claiming that partnership. And that was so exciting for us to start to see more and more women out there. And so now here we are in 2015. So we're kind of like going, kind of jumping ahead decades here. And where are things now? And so Betsy and I were talking about this recently and kind of thinking about women at work, women in leadership, what are the trends there, knowing that with COVID, so many women left the workplace because of those demands at home. And with, women, even with the growing equality, women still do the primary caretaking at home. And COVID hit women so hard in terms of engagement in the workplace. Now, those women have come back. We're not quite where we were, but we've come back pretty strongly. And so that's great. And there's more and more trends that the corporate workplaces anyway, are providing more flexibility for all their employees. There's more of a focus on work-life balance. And so that, of course, really benefits women at work in very powerful ways. So there are some concerning trends too, in that there has been a decline in corporate America anyway, and in university settings and in other places on diversity and inclusion programs. And so that is troubling in terms of how that might continue supporting women in the workplace moving forward. Now, what we have learned about partnership is that the external conditions in some ways, women can create their own internal conditions through partnership. And through those connections, whatever's going on out there, women can realize these benefits that we talk about in the book, and that you talked about at the beginning of this conversation, in terms of the flexibility, the support, the increased confidence, mutual accountability, and joy and happiness. That is always going to be relevant. And so wherever you are, whatever your work situation is, finding those partners, and we can talk more about, an expansive idea of partnership with the rubber band theory, Betsy. I think, that it's just, there's a lot of ways to think about what partnership is that's always going to be relevant.
Right. Yes, to all that Maggie just said. I think it is still, it is still a logical, practical, important way of working. I think there are new obstacles and there are new opportunities, as Maggie said. And and just to hit on, just to take what Maggie said even a step further, was we've really found that having a partnership lens for women, and not all women do, and not all humans do, is so important. And we've really tried to cultivate that for ourselves and for the people we coach and work with. But how do you bring a partnership lens? How are you thinking about how you're partnering? And I'll give an example. I have a colleague who said to me, at one point, she said, I think you what did she say? I think you overemphasize partnership, or, I think that's too important to you. And I said, really? I said, I think it's very important. Well, over that time, as I've kind of applied that lens in our work together, as I've tried to find opportunities to celebrate her, to collaborate, to work together, I find that she now more and more calls me a partner. Oh, is my sound still very light? Okay, great. That she is looking to me as a partner. In fact, she just wrote that somewhere and thanked me for my partnership. So I feel that has made an incredible difference, a very important difference in our work together, seeing each other as partners versus colleagues in doing our own individual work. But it's also, doing that requires intention, and it requires being willing to share the credit, to celebrate someone else, to shine their light. And so important, and the gains are so great, but it is a shift for us sometimes.
What steps did you take to build a strong and vibrant partnership? And I am talking about when you you started Mulberry and you went through that whole process, and how did you keep each other kind of front and center on the partnership? Because no relationship is perfect, right? And you've been friends for a long time, and sometimes there's things that are outside of this amazing partnership that feed into that you weren't expecting.
True. You want me to start with that one, Maggie, or
Please.
well, so many steps. I mean, there's so much we could say about so many of those things, but I want to say that one of the things we did was to take our partnership seriously. We said this is going to be an intentional partnership, and because of that, we developed a partnership agreement. And that is so, if you're going to have an intentional, we were earlier, a moment ago, I was talking about less formal partnerships, but in this case, this formal partnership, we sat down, we talked through a partnership agreement. At first, we did it more as our own document. Later, we lawyered up and had some legal backing to it, just to keep ourselves protected, because it was so important to us to keep our friendship protected. And to keep the entity that we were creating protected. We appointed or we identified a mediator in case we ever were in this position of having a conflict that we couldn't resolve. So I don't think he knew that he was our mediator until years later. We never tapped him. We never needed to tap him as a mediator. But at one point we said, "Hey, did you know?"
Yeah.
But we really were very intentional. And then we're also, Maggie and I are pretty intentional, and we've learned along the way. As you said, nothing is perfect. And we've learned along the way about how to handle conflict. And we've learned that if you don't handle conflict in a relationship that matters, it's not going away. It's going to get bigger. So we've learned that we handle it right away. When it comes up, we address it as immediately as we can and talk it through before it becomes something that can get between us. And there's so many other things we've done. I know Maggie has, lots of other thoughts about what we did to create our partnership.
Yeah, I think that the communication piece, the open communication from the very, very beginning, and Betsy has only deepened these skills, but had those skills as a mediator, as a facilitator. And I've developed those through our entity over a long period of time. But you really brought that perspective, Betsy, about, okay, how are we going to have these conversations? This is important. We've got to, we can't put things off. We need to deal with what needs to be dealt with. And through that practice of having tough conversations and expecting to have those that just grew and grew and grew, so that now, we can unpack something really quickly and just move on. I would say, there were a lot of external obstacles in our partnership path, including, I was diagnosed with leukemia in 2007, and that really just, I was 40, and it just took me completely by surprise, took Betsy completely by surprise. I mean, and it really just, because we had this intentional working partnership and friendship, there was a lot that had to be navigated through that, because we really had been 50-50 partners. And then when I got sick, we had to figure out, well, what that was going to look like. And Betsy, shouldered the load there at work while, I got well for a while, and then was able to come back. And that took a lot of trust, a lot of flexibility, a lot of intentionality to get through that rough period. And then right around that time, we had the recession hit. So then it was like, okay, well, here's another thing. We're going to have to just figure out how to, get through this. And then the thing that we always say is, we'll get through it because we have each other. We'll figure it
Right.
out. And so having that vision, sometimes we weren't sure how, but we knew we would. And we have.
I had to say, I don't want to cause a conflict here, but Maggie
Bring it on.
is very adept when it comes to being so thoughtful and being so able to handle. I mean, she works for the conflict resolution
Yes,
center
I
now.
saw that.
Yes,
Yeah.
and being so
Now.
adept, and she's just, when there have been times like when I've been like, let's just let this go, Maggie's been like, no, let's look at this. And I really have always appreciated it, and always makes us stronger. And so she's giving me a lot of credit right now, but so much credit goes to Maggie, for just, and also just, there have been times when we've taken turns in terms of really who's shouldering. And that's been kind of sometimes more seamless than others, sometimes brought on by, as you said, Maggie, leukemia and other
Another
recessions and
absolutely
etc.
tale.
But also just due to the ebbs and flows of life too.
Yes.
Been there
Yes.
for each other and shouldered it.
Yes. So, first of all, love, respect, open communication, honesty. And when something rears its ugly head, deal with it right there. Don't ignore it, because we know that can cause resentment sometimes if you can't communicate and if you don't feel like you're in a safe place to communicate. So those are all really important.
We wrote a whole chapter called Conflict in Cars, because we realized that if we didn't resolve it, the conflict would come up on our way to a client meeting.
Oh, worst place.
possible
Worst
time.
The worst possible time.
I
Yeah.
have experienced that personally on the way to a climate meeting.
Mhm.
There is a time and a place to talk about conflict, ladies.
Yes.
I have
Yes, but
learned
when
this lesson.
yeah. But when you don't, it doesn't disappear. It's like a
It
cold.
doesn't.
Can't make it go away.
You
It
can't make
doesn't.
it go away. That's right.
Um,
And then there's so much like really powerful transformation that can happen.
yes.
Trust is high, and you really value your own perspective, and you value someone else's perspective, so that you can, do that internal reflection and also learn so much about yourself, about looking at the world, about, just how decisions can be made in a way that might not be your first reaction. But when that trust level is high and the communication is high, there's space for that more of the 360 view of something. And that can just lead to just really powerful outcomes. So I learned that so much through our partnership. And yes, now I do a lot of work with conflict out in the workplace, and a lot of workplace mediations. And so much of what I know about how to support people going through that, I did learn through Mulberry,
Mm-hmm. Right. Well, thank you for sharing that. Really appreciate the stories. My final question before I turn it back over to Linda is, with 10 years of change, if you can believe it, I can't believe 10 years have passed since you were, and your own personal journeys, would the steps that you recommend in the book, be the same today? Would you change anything that you wrote about? That is a loaded question. I know for the time that we have, I have so many other ones, but yeah.
What do you think, Maggie? Would we change anything?
I think I mean, I think we would add.
Yes.
I think we
Yeah.
would continue to add. But I think, I think the book itself and the content and the organization of it is a really accurate reflection of what our experience of partnership and what it takes and what is possible as a result of it. So I know as I kind of alluded to in responding to the last question, this is the framework, this is the partnership lens that I still use every day.
Mm-hmm.
So
I,
yeah, we're always learning, but and certainly there might be some things I would phrase differently or some maybe, to pick some different data points or something like that. But I do feel like in terms of what that partnership lens is, that it's really strong. What would you add, Betsy?
I agree completely. One thing I think we would add, because we did more work on this after we wrote the book, is that we would talk more about the partnership lens. We were very, very much focused on formal partnerships, women who
Uh,
were intentionally working together. And I think
yeah.
we probably, we would include more about how you can be a partner without even, how you can have that lens, even if others around you don't.
Yes, yes. I
Yeah.
see that as such a valuable concept to write 2.0 on. Ladies, you're writing a second book after this.
Yeah, that could be. Yeah.
Linda, I'm going a bit off script, but I'm pretty certain that these co-authors can answer this. How do you think, because you just alluded to this, Betsy, how does partnership show up today, or how can it show up today in the corporate world that we live in?
Great
Um,
question.
I would ask, how are there organizations that you think are doing it well, but how does that show up? Is it having that partnership mentality? How do you train to that? How do you onboard people? Where does that start?
We did a session at a conference after the book came out, and we talked. These were women who were working for the U.S. federal government and in different related organizations, and some of them shared with us that I hope this is changing, but they shared with us that they aren't able to partner. They were not in structures that allowed for partnership. And I do think that is still the case. And, I work in a university setting, collaboration is encouraged, but sometimes partnership is still, I think, a challenge. And so, I think it is having that lens. I think it is, especially as women are more and more seasoned and comfortable in their careers and places, having that lens and that lookout for other women. And I think the more we do that, the more we practice that, the more contagious that is. Contagious in a good way.
Mhm. Mhm.
Yes, yes, I absolutely agree. And that could be said, and that's an easy thing to implement, right? Start with yourself.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. And I'm also thinking of, I was coaching a leader who had hired an amazing assistant director. And the assistant director was just being celebrated by everyone. I mean, she was just doing a terrific job. And the leader, who was also doing a great job and who had hired this woman, this assistant, was very apprehensive and anxious about this hire because she felt like she might be being outshined by
Mm,
this other woman. And
yes,
in our coaching, we talked about the fact that you hired her. You created this opportunity. Now celebrate it. How can you celebrate this woman? How can you make this an exponential opportunity versus a limitation for you? Because it really isn't one. I mean, this is wow. I mean, here's to this woman for hiring her. And now may this be here to this woman for celebrating and shining the light on her assistant director. So
yes,
they both could be seen as very successful. I
yes,
think
absolutely.
sometimes we're threatened by that.
Yes, that's an absolute truth in the workplace. That is an absolute truth. And I think sometimes that's a cultural thing, the culture of the workplace,
Mhm.
because that is the norm. It's very competitive and it's not a psychologically safe place. In which case that might not be the place that you want to be ultimately. But also there's those workplaces where it's what you've described. It's supporting each other, it's lifting each other up. And not taking credit, but certainly taking part and celebrating that other person's success. So thanks for answering that. Linda, I'll turn it over to you. Thank
Yeah,
Maggie
you.
may
and
have more.
I also, oh, sorry, Betsy, go ahead.
I was just saying, Maggie, you might have more to add to
Oh,
that.
I'm sorry, Betsy. Go ahead, Maggie.
I'm thinking of, the confidence and the clarity around what your values are and why those values are important to you. I mean, having that confidence and trust in yourself,
Yeah.
that this is a strong, powerful way to work. You kind of have, starting there and then looking for your allies. I mean, we did work with in a health system, for example, where there was one woman who was in leadership who younger women just kept, or more junior women kept coming to her, coming to her, coming to her in this very kind of hierarchical and patriarchal, sometimes toxic sort of culture. And then she had the insight, like, we need a different platform so we can all connect. And she was able to establish an employee group so that women in leadership were able to come together. So they had access to her as mentor and then also the peer support to come through that so that they could support each other as they were moving on up into the organization with the hope of eventually changing the overall organizational culture. But when they found each other, they just could kind of relax that freedom piece.
Yeah.
And that meant so much to all the women who were engaged. But that was one woman who had an idea and
Yes.
and moved it forward. Yeah.
And yeah, and very willing women who were working with her. I mean, it was just that
Right.
was
It was
so
her
Maggie
idea.
and I were so inspired
Yeah,
by that project and that work with them.
that's right. Her idea, and then partners to make it that dream come to life, right?
And what a
That,
great place to
that
work.
That
Yeah.
really too taps into my question that's been sitting with me around, is one thing more important than another? Because from my own perspective over the years, that trust and that values connect have been key. Without the values connect, it does not work, and without trust. And you have to trust yourself as much as the other person, right? Especially when there's conflict, as you say, Maggie, because if you're in conflict, and you don't trust yourself or you don't trust the other person, you are not going to step in and it's not going to get resolved. It's just going to grow. And so, yeah, is there one that's more important than another from your perspective, or would it be values and trust?
Well, I think you have to, I think, make the leap of trust, but then you also have to do the work to to keep realizing the trust, right?
Mhm.
And you're so right, Linda, that you also have to trust yourself. Maggie and I would often say, like, what's the point? Like, how can we be good partners for each other if we don't believe in ourselves?
Yeah.
Because that just, yeah, if I'm constantly doubting myself, what does that do for Maggie? And vice versa. But one, Maggie and I we were talking about these very important characteristics, and one of the ones that we also thought was very important was being very clear about expectations, because that achieves greater trust, and it takes trust to clarify those
Yeah.
expectations. Because when you don't, that leads to assumptions, and sometimes those assumptions can burrow their way in and lead to conflict.
Yeah. It's interesting because over the years, I think I've always attracted very extroverted individuals to partner with. I'm not extroverted by nature, but I'm attracted to people like that. And so they say whatever's on their mind. Like my previous partner in another company creating people power, she still runs that. She bought it. She would just call it. Like it would just be on the table. And I mean, she's so kind that you just knew the spirit of intent, right? You just knew
Yeah,
that it came from a good place.
yeah.
And so that trust was so solid. Yeah, it makes such a difference.
Yeah.
So I am going to open it up to everybody because we're we're already over our time. If we go 5 minutes over, are the two of you okay, Betsy and Maggie, or are you tight for time?
5 minutes is
You're
okay.
good? Okay, 5 minutes. Okay. So let's open it up. Who would like to ask the first question? Just make sure we can see your face and we know that you're gonna ask the question and go for it. Yeah, just take yourself off mute. I'll put myself on mute.
Hi, Betsy and Maggie. Thanks so much for this conversation. It's been so interesting for me, and I've really reflected on a lot of my own experiences. And one thing that's come up for me that I'd appreciate your thoughts on, I was thinking that so many of the partnerships that I've had, I would call them organic, that they sort of developed from conversations and interactions and a shared purpose, but we didn't set out to say we're partners. And yet, as I reflect on those experiences, we were partners and we were very much going against the grain of that individually focused culture that we find ourselves in. And this is post-secondary,
Yeah.
university college kind of situation. So I'd be interested in your thoughts on that. I don't think it's a dichotomy of organic and intentional, but just maybe that part of the process of coming together.
Hmm. Yeah, I really appreciate the question. And I think however a partnership comes to be, if it's an organic partnership, and that to me says that you, Catherine, right? Yeah, yeah, you're bringing kind of that spirit of partnership with you, right? That you're looking for that. Maybe those are some of your your core values as a person. And then if there is that organic partnership, there can be the intentionality that can come up around it that can support it and support its growth. Because sometimes what can happen, if it is organic without the intentionality at some place along the line, if you hit a rocky patch, then you don't necessarily know what to do about that. But if you've heard other stories of women in partnership and you hear that, okay, yeah, so they had maybe something externally changed for them. Maybe, like in my case, I had leukemia and that affected the partnership, and we got through it, right? That can encourage you to stay the track, right? And to work out that conflict and figure out, well, what's next, and stretch that rubber band in terms of the flexibility so you can maintain some level of the partnership even as things might change around you. So I think they're both beautiful things, the organic and the intention, and they can work together really, really well.
And I think actually, as I'm listening to you, Maggie, I'm realizing as we got deeper into our partnership, it became something that we intentionally nurtured.
There you go.
That's
Yeah,
smart.
there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah. And I find just using the term partner, when I'm working with someone and when I calling them a partner, make that just that simple thing can also bring a level of intentionality to it. Naming it.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah,
Thank
great
you.
question, Catherine. Great question. Yeah. Anybody else? The floor is open. No other. I have one other that I can fill the time with for sure. I have six others. Um, but I have two sons who are two middle-aged sons, both entrepreneurs, both own their own businesses. And when I was talking to each of them about this call and this book and how much I enjoyed it and how much a part of my life it's been, they said, yes, and not my style, Mom. they tend to be more competitive, even in their partnerships. My youngest son has some relationships that he would call partnerships, but my eldest has none. He doesn't, he said, I've never had a partner I could trust. And yet he has a woman controller who really is his partner. I watch them together. They are partners. They make decisions together. He respects her. And when I said her name, he said, "You're right. She is my partner." So the only partnership he recognized with some coaching or suggestion was another woman. And so I wonder if you're in your if someone's ever done any research on if men step into collaborative relationships like that successfully. Because as I looked in my circle, I honestly don't know any who have working relationships like I've had.
That's so interesting. It's funny. When we first started writing the book, we were challenged by our publisher and our editor, like, why is this different for women? Are you saying that that women should partner, that men shouldn't? And what we realized was that when you think at that time, when you would do a Google search for women working together or women partnering, the examples that came up were Cagney and Lacey, which I don't know if you remember this TV show, but it's an old TV show about women who are police detectives together. It's a TV show. It's a TV show. Laverne and Shirley, old TV show, and Thelma and Louise,
Thelma and Louise.
movie.
Right?
Two women, they drive
went
off.
off.
Maggie and I are doing it together. They drive off a cliff. That's what came up for women working together. Lucy and Ethel, like they were all
Yeah.
fictional
Fictional.
examples. But when we looked up men,
Yeah.
tons of examples came up.
Oh.
Abbott and Costello, Laurel and Hardy, the
Ben and
Levi
Jerry.
brothers, the founders of Twitter, and the founders of Apple. I think founders of Apple, founders of Google. Anyway, but endless examples of men partnering. And what we realized was it's not so much that this is a model that women should uniquely embrace. It's the fact that men confidently do it in their own, maybe in their different ways, Linda, as you're saying about your son, or your sons, but they are partnering. And there was Maggie, there was a picture we found of the day of the IPO for Twitter. And these men are just standing there celebrating, woohoo, Twitter IPO, we're partners. We didn't find those pictures or examples for women. And so what we realized was, the title of the book reflects this, was that we as women get so much from partnering. And going back to the first comment, there aren't many models. Men have many models. They might do it differently, but they have many models for it.
Yeah.
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 And it's fair to say on that note that perhaps we get more out of it. Because of who we are. And I mean, I think that's fair to say.
Well, so many women,
different needs.
Yes.
I think that may be part of it, and that clarity around why you're in partnership is so important. And coming back to something you said earlier, Linda, like that, the complementary roles or complementary skills, like what you're bringing is really important. And so, when you're clear on what it is that you're looking to get out of the partnership, as well as, I think with a lot of the women we talked with, it was that, the confidence, the flexibility, those things that we've talked about, the freedom and the accountability, and maybe for men, they're different, not to stereotype, but maybe there are different needs in partnership.
Yeah.
And I just thought it was so interesting.
It'll be interesting too, going back to Catherine's question, what would happen if your son started really thinking about his controller as a partner intentionally?
I'm sure he's thinking.
That transition from organic to, and then move, the spectrum to intentionality,
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
There'll be more conversation at our house for sure.
I'm sure.
Beam us in. We want to hear. Beam us in.
Well, and it's particularly interesting because my eldest thinks that I I do everything right. Like he just thinks as a leader, I've got it right. I've got him fooled completely. But as a leader, he thinks I've done everything right. And so he was so, it was just such a rich conversation because he just comes from another place. And I think it's about lack of awareness of the value of a collaborative working relationship or a partnership. I don't think he's ever thought about it. And I think he is now. So I look forward to the next conversation.
And just to let you know, we did hear from women the same similar comments about we've heard from women say, I don't think I need to partner, so
Yeah, but it's so rich.
yeah,
I mean,
right,
if I could
right.
look back on my life, it is why I am where I am. It is the joy I've had. It continues to be the joy. Laura and I are just having a blast. This would not be nearly as much fun if I was solo. It just wouldn't.
So
It
Ditto.
wouldn't
so
be as
much
good
fun.
either. I mean,
That,
there's whole bunches of things.
yeah.
I'm
You just hit
very
it.
aware of the time. I think we're starting to do our interviews with the next one because we run out of time constantly with questions. So I'm sorry that we're cutting you off, but I invite others to reach out to both of you, ask your questions, pick up the book. Well, don't pick up the book. It's hard to find in Canada, but you can get it online and
Yes.
read it online. So that's probably the easiest. But it's a great read, and there are some things that will make you go, right. I know that. Good reminder. Yeah. So if you enjoyed the conversation today, we invite you to watch our website, readersofthepack.com, for upcoming interviews and other events. There's more coming this year. We're just putting it all together, more change. If love hosting our leadership learning labs for internal teams with the book of your choice, with one of our books. We interviewed 12 authors last year. Every single one was great. So any one of those 12 books would make for a great book club, or in fact, this one, if you have a group of women especially, so rich. We hope you're excited about 2025, and here's wishing you much success as you live your dreams, learn, laugh, and love. Thank you all for joining us, and we're now signing off for Author Speak series with Betsy, Polk, Joseph, and Maggie Chotas. Our first Author Speak interview of 2025. And thank you to my co-host, Laura, and to everyone who attended today. Loved the conversation.